Hi everyone, thanks for joining me here on JKD Handmade. For this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to crochet this raglan top. This is an easy pattern that's worked according to body measurements. All measurements are provided for in the tutorial as we work along this pattern. We will begin at the neckline with a cord. We'll then work our way down the yoke, down the body. At the bottom, we'll form these ties. And then we'll move on to the sleeves. We'll attach yarn at the armhole and work the sleeves, leaving an opening along the top edge. The length of this top and that of the sleeves are adjustable. Work it long, cropped, or short as you wish. The ties at the bottom are also optional. For the materials, you will need yarn. I went with this a brand called Bamboo, which is a 4-ply yarn. Any 4-ply or sport weight, which are category 2s of any brand, will do for this pattern. I find that soft, light yarns work well. The recommended hook on the yarn label is a 3,5mm hook, and each skein is approximately 100 grams. For this pattern, I used a 4mm hook, even though the recommended hook is a 3,5mm hook. And then I used just less than 3 skeins, so it's less than 300 grams of yarn for a size medium. Keep in mind that the quantity also depends on the size and the length. You will also need stitch markers, a pair of scissors, a measuring tape, and a yarn or a wool needle. Okay, so that does it for the materials. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. That's if you enjoy my tutorials. And yes, let's get on with this one. Hope you enjoy. Okay, so we are going to begin at the neckline, and to do so, we're going to work up a cord. Now for this cord, you need a really long tail end. I set aside about 3 meters for my tail end. That's most probably 120 inches if I'm not mistaken. So form a slip knot using your 4mm hook. Now you'll see here I'm orientating myself. I'm bringing the tail end closer to myself, and on one side I've got a grip on the tail end, and on the other I've got the end that's attached to my skein of yarn. Wrap the tail end around the hook as I've done here, holding on to the little point from the slip knot, yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. That's the first stitch formed. Continuing on, wrap the tail end around the hook, then yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. Wrap the tail end around your hook, yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. Continue on by wrapping the tail end and pulling through both loops on your hook. Continue on until you've used up most of your tail end and you formed a length of stitches for your cord. I've completed a length for my cord. Here it is. Now the next step is to fit this cord around the circumference of the head of yourself or whomever you are making this for. Both ends must meet around the circumference of the head, and when fitting on, do not stretch or pull on this cord. So you are fitting it on unstretched around the circumference of the head. So I've worked on a chart for this raglan. As you know, a raglan is split up into 4 separations. So we've got the sleeve, the front, the second sleeve and the back separation. Now you will need to count the number of stitches that you've worked for this card and fit those number of stitches into this chart. On the left on this chart, listed in bold, are the number of stitches. So those are the numbers you would use to fit the number of stitches you've worked into this chart. For the top that I've worked, for that neckline cord, I used 136 stitches because my actual cord, the closest number of stitches was 136 stitches. So you would use whatever figure comes closest to the number of stitches that you've worked for your cord. Now, in my case, I did work 138 stitches. So I needed to remove 2 stitches, and that brought it to 136 stitches. That way, I was able to fit the number of stitches on my cord to the number of stitches on this chart. So now that you've fitted this cord around your head and you know that it fits the circumference of the head, go ahead, count the number of stitches and adjust the number of stitches to the closest stitch count on this chart by either removing stitches or adding on stitches. I actually prefer removing stitches to get it to the closest stitch count on the chart. I actually calculated quite a wide range of stitch counts and separations for this chart, simply because different yarns give different outcomes. So that was just to accommodate different yarns, and also so that you could work this top for almost any size. All you got to do is make certain that your stitch count matches the stitch count that I have listed in bold. That way you are able to separate this neckline into your sleeve, front sleeve and back separations. We now need to join both ends to form a ring. Before doing so, make certain that this entire cord is not twisted. Join by slip stitching the first and last stitch. We will now separate this ring. Using the chart, you'll see next to the number in bold, there are 3 digits. Those are your separations. In my case, it's the 29th, the 69th, and the 97th stitch. Count start as your first stitch and also know that it is the first corner. I'll mark off the 29th stitch with a stitch marker. This will be my second corner. Next, I'll count and mark off the 69th stitch as my third corner. And lastly, it's the 97th stitch, which I'll mark off as my fourth corner. Here I have my neckline all marked off. Here start, and then it's the sleeve separation, followed by the front, the sleeve separation, and the back separation. Know that the sleeve separations are slightly shorter than the front and the back separation. It's important when working a raglan that you are able to distinguish the sleeve separations from your front and back separations. Now let's work round 1 of the yoke. Chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Chain 4 counts as a double crochet and chain 1. Skip the next stitch and into the next stitch work a double crochet. chain 1, skip the next stitch, and into the next stitch work a double crochet. So that's your stitch pattern for the rest of this yoke. It's chain 1, skip 1, double crochet. Continue on to the next stitch marker. I've worked my way to the first stitch marker. Here I will be working the second corner. You'll see that I do have one stitch remaining and then it's the stitch marked off. So I'm going to chain 1, skip the 1 stitch, and into the stitch that's marked off, I'll work a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet all into that 1 stitch. Now this is a V stitch and we will be working V stitches into all corners. Replace your stitch marker into the chain 1 space to mark off your corner. Continue on by chaining 1, skip 1 stitch and working a double crochet. You'll continue on with this stitch pattern throughout this round, and for your corners, the stitches that are marked off with stitch markers, you will work V stitches. I've worked my way to the end of round 1. To complete the round, we need to complete this first corner. So here I've worked my last stitch and now I have 1 stitch remaining, and then I can complete that V stitch. So it's a chain 1, skip the next stitch, and into that stitch where we had begun this round, where we had worked a chain 4, we will work a double crochet into the bottom of that stitch. Then chain 1 and slip stitch into the 3rd chain from chain 4 to join. So here you formed a V stitch, which is your first corner. This completes round 1 of the yoke. So if we look at it again, here's the back, and then we have the sleeve, the front, and then it's the sleeve. Round 2, turn, slip stitch into the chain 1 space, then it's chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, chain 4 counts as a double crochet and chain 1, double crochet into that stitch that makes up the V stitch from the previous round, then chain 1, skip the chain 1 space and work a double crochet into the double crochet from the previous round. So your stitch pattern for this round is chain 1, skip the chain 1 space and double crochet into the double crochet from the previous round. Continue on with this stitch pattern until you get to the next corner. I've worked my way to the next corner. Here I am at the next corner. I've worked a double crochet into that last stitch and I've chained 1, and then I have the V stitch that makes up the next corner. So I'll work a double crochet into that stitch that makes up the V stitch from the previous round. Now the tip for this pattern is to always work double crochets into all double crochets. Then it's a chain 1, and into that chain 1 space marked off as my corner, I'll work a V stitch, which is a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, all worked into that chain 1 space. Mark off your chain 1 space with a stitch marker. Continuing on, the stitch pattern is chain 1, double crochet into the double crochet from the previous round. Then it's chain 1, skip your chain 1 space, double crochet into the next stitch. Continue on with the stitch pattern throughout the round. At your corners, I've worked my way to the end of round 2. Here I am at this corner that I need to complete. I've worked a double crochet into that stitch that makes up the V-stitch from the previous round. And then it's a chain 1 into that chain 1 space from where my first chain 4 came out of. I'll work a double crochet. Then it's a chain 1 and slip stitch into the third chain from chain 4. So here I've completed that first corner. Here's my V-stitch. Round 3, turn, slip stitch into that chain 1 space. Now the pattern is exactly the same as you had worked for round 2. It's chain 4 and thereafter you're working double crochets into all double crochets and you chaining chain 1s in between. You'll work V stitches into all those chain 1 spaces marked off as corners. I've continued on with the yoke and I've completed 4 rounds. At this point, you need to find the center or the middle of your sleeve separations. Here I have my back separation and opposite to that is the front separation. On either side are the sleeve separations. Make certain that you know exactly which are your sleeve separations. The sleeve separations are a few stitches shorter than that of the front and the back separations. You'll need 2 stitch markers, and I went about counting the number of stitches or chain 1 spaces along my sleeve separation, and I found the exact center of the separation. So here it is, my sleeve separation, and I went about counting those chain 1 spaces from corner to corner. Here at the stitch marker, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So that would be 10 chain 1 spaces on either side. So here I'm counting the 10 chain 1 spaces, and I've got my stitch right in the center of my sleeve separation marked off. Now remember that this would be different for different sizes. All you need to do is find that middle stitch or center stitch from your sleeve separation. Now we'll do the same on the opposite side for the second sleeve separation, finding the center or the middle stitch. I've now got the middle of my sleeve separations marked off, as you see here. We will now continue on with the yoke, only this time we will be working it in 2 parts. So for the first part, we will be working from the stitch marker. We'll work half the sleeve, we'll work the back separation, and we'll work half the sleeve on the opposite side to complete the first half of the yoke. And then for the second half of the yoke, we'll again work from the stitch marker, working the second half of the sleeve. We'll work the front separation and we'll work the second half of the next sleeve. That way we complete the yoke, and at the same time we're able to form those openings at the top edge of our sleeve. Now you do want to fasten off and cut off on the excess yarn. Attach yarn to the stitch marker along the sleeve separation. Chain 4. Chain 4 counts as a double crochet and chain 1. And here again you're following the same stitch pattern. It's skip the chain 1 space and into the double crochet from the previous round, work a double crochet. Repeat the stitch pattern to the corner. At the chain 1 space that's marked off, work a V-stitch. Continue on with the same stitch pattern to the next corner. At that chain 1 space that's marked off, work a V-stitch, and then you'll continue on with the stitch pattern to that stitch marker separation in between the sleeve. I've completed this round here. I've worked from stitch marker to stitch marker, and then I'll continue on. I'll repeat the same stitch pattern, which is chain 4. Chain 4 counts as a double crochet and chain 1, and then it's turn, skip the chain 1 space, double crochet into the next stitch, and again you're continuing on with the same stitch pattern. At those 2 corners you'll work V stitches. Here are the standard armhole depth measurements for the different sizes. You will need these measurements to continue on with the pattern. Use the measurement for the size that you are working. I've continued on with the first half of this yoke, as you see here. All I've done was repeat these rows back and forth from stitch marker to stitch marker. I now need to make certain that the armhole depth for the size that I'm working is correct. So I will measure the armhole depth measurement, and it measures 7,5 inches, which is the measurement for a size medium. So you will work as many rows as need be until this half of the yoke measures the armhole depth measurement for the size that you are working. Now you need to measure from the shoulder going down the yoke as I have done here. You can now fasten off and cut off on the excess yarn. We will now work the second half of the yoke. That's half the sleeve, the front separation, and half the sleeve on the opposite side. Attach yarn to the stitch marker as I am doing here. Then it's chain 4, and we're following the same stitch pattern around this second half of the yoke. Complete the row at the stitch marker, marking off half the sleeve on the opposite side. Work back and forth from stitch marker to stitch marker as I had done for the first half of the yoke, working your 2 corners in between, and make certain that you work the same number of rounds as you did for the first half of the yoke. I've completed my yoke as you see here. You can now fasten off and cut off on the excess yarn. By folding the yoke in half as I am doing here, you can once again measure out the armhole depth measurement, measuring from the shoulder edge right at the top of the yoke to going down the yoke as I am doing here. So this measures 7,5 inches, and that's around 19 centimeters, which is the measurement for a size medium. We can now continue on with the body of this top. Attach yarn to the chain 1 space at the corner. Make certain that it's a chain 1 space at the corner that continues on to the sleeve. Round 1 of the body, chain 4. Chain 4 counts as a double crochet and chain 1. Then you'll skip the stitches in between. These stitches make up the sleeve separation, and you'll join with a double crochet into the next corner. We've now formed the first armhole space. Now here there's two options. You could continue on with the mesh stitch pattern, which is chain 1, skip 1 double crochet, or you could alternate between rounds of double crochet and rounds of chain 1, skip 1 double crochet, as I have done for my top. So when working these double crochets, you're just working your double crochets into all your chain 1 spaces and into all your stitches. Continue on with your stitch pattern to the next corner. I've worked my way to the next corner. I've worked a double crochet into that chain 1 space at the corner. Then it's chain 1. Skip the stitches in between. These stitches make up the second sleeve and join to the next corner with a double crochet into the chain 1 space. Continue on with your stitch pattern to the end of the round. I've worked my way to the end of the round. To complete this round, slip stitch into the third chain from chain 4 to join. As I mentioned earlier, I will be alternating between rounds of just double crochet and rounds of chain 1, skip 1 double crochet. So here I'm doing a chain 1, skip 1 double crochet. Continue on with your chosen stitch pattern to the end of the round. I've repeated the stitch pattern. I've alternated between rounds of double crochet and rounds of chain 1, skip 1 double crochet. Work as many rounds as need be to get to the length of your top. Also note that the ties at the bottom edge of this top measures around 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so do allow for that length on your top. You can now fasten off and cut off on the excess yarn. To work the ties along the bottom edge, we need to find the center front. Once you've found center front, mark it off using your hook and count 6 stitches on either side of center front. So that's 2, 4, 6. Mark it off with a stitch marker. And on the opposite side, it's 2, 4, 6, and mark that off with a stitch marker. Remove the hook and orientate the top so that you are able to continue on. Attach yarn to one of those stitch markers. Here we're working around the piece from stitch marker to stitch marker, leaving the center front, those few stitches at center front, unworked. Attach yarn. Chain 3. Chain 3 counts as our first stitch, in this case a double crochet. Continue on working double crochets from this stitch marker all the way around to the next stitch marker. I've worked my way around from stitch marker to stitch marker. For the next round, it's chain 3, turn, work double crochets all the way around. I've completed a second and third round of double crochets along the bottom edge. So here's round 1, 2, and 3. You can now fasten off and cut off on the excess yarn. To lengthen up for the ties, we need to begin with a chain. Form a slip knot. Chain a length of chains. Here I am chaining a length of 30 chains. You may chain more should you wish to have a longer length for your ties. I've got my 30 chains all chained. Now we need to attach this chain to the bottom edge. orientate your piece so that you attach the chain to where you had fastened off and cut off on the excess yarn. To attach this chain, work a double crochet into that first stitch. Here's my chain attached to the bottom edge with a double crochet. Continue on working double crochets into all your stitches to the end of this round on the opposite side. I've worked those double crochets and here I am on the opposite side. I now need to chain a length of chains just as I had done on the other side. So here I will chain the same number of chains plus 2 additional chains. So on the opposite side I chain 30 chains. On this side I will chain 32 chains. That way when I work my stitches I have an equal number of stitches on either side for my ties. My chain is complete. For the next round it's turn into the 4th chain from the hook, double crochet. Continue on working double crochets into the remaining chains, and thereafter you work double crochets into your stitches, and once you get to the opposite chain you will work double crochets into that chain as well. I've continued on and I've worked 3 rows of double crochet to complete these ties along the bottom edge. I then fastened off and cut off on the excess yarn. Now that we have these ties complete, we can move on to the sleeves. For the sleeves, we will be working from this top edge right here all the way around to the edge on the opposite side. So we'll work back and forth from one edge to the next. Attach yarn to the top edge of your sleeve. Now you're following the same mesh stitch pattern, which is chain 4, counting as a double crochet and chain 1. Skip the chain 1 space, work a double crochet into the double crochet from the previous round. And you'll continue on with the same stitch pattern to the opposite side of your sleeve. You will then repeat the stitch pattern back and forth until you've worked as many rows as need be to get your sleeve to your desired length. I've kept my sleeve or the length of my sleeve at mid-length. You could go shorter on the sleeve or even longer. We now need to work the ribbing on the sleeve. Before doing so, we need to join both edges of our sleeve. Bring both the edges of the sleeve together and slip stitch to join. Chain 3. Chain 3 counts as our first stitch, in this case a double crochet. Turn. Here we're working double crochets into all stitches and all chain 1 spaces. And at the same time, we need to decrease to tighten up on the ribbing of the sleeve. I've already worked the first sleeve, so it gives you an idea of what I mean. I've worked this round of decreases before working the actual ribbing, and that way I tighten up on the sleeve. Now here you can alternate between a double crochet and a decrease, or you could work decreases into all stitches. I actually went ahead and worked decreases into all my stitches. That way it gave me a better fit. So to work a decrease, it's yarn over, insert your hook into that chain 1 space, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop. You have 4 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook. So that was a decrease. So if you are alternating, you'll work a double crochet into the next chain space, and then it's a decrease into the next stitch and the chain space. That's yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the chain space, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. Continue on working these decreases and double crochets all the way around. Now, if you decide not to work double crochets, all you're doing is working decreases throughout this round. That way you end up with a tighter fit on your ribbing. I've completed this round of decreases. Now for the ribbing, here we're working front post double crochets and we're alternating with back post double crochets. To begin, it's chain 3, into the next stitch, we'll work a front post double crochet. So it's yarn over, insert your hook into the post of the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook. And now for a back post double crochet, it's yarn over, insert your hook into the post of the stitch going from behind, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook. And here you're alternating, so it's a front post double crochet, you're going into the post of the stitch working from the front, and then it's a back post double crochet. You're going into the post of the stitch working from the back. Continue on alternating between these 2 stitches to the end of the round. I've completed round 1 of this ribbing, and to end the round I slip stitched into the 3rd chain from chain 3 to join. For round 2, chain 3 and turn. Here again we're working front post double crochets alternating with back post double crochets. Only this time you need to see your actual stitches, because the front post double crochets from the previous round now look like the back post double crochets. So you will work a back post double crochets into those front posts from the previous round, and the front posts double crochet into the back posts from the previous round. So an easy way to remember this is to look at your stitches. All the posts that face towards the back, like the one right here, that's where I would work a back post double crochet. And then you have your stitches or your posts that face towards the front, like the one right here. That's where I would work a front post double crochet. When working this round, look at your stitches, or rather the posts of your stitches, and that will help you decide on whether you're working a front post double crochet or a back post double crochet. For all your posts that lay facing up, you will work front post double crochets, and for all those posts that look like they are at the back of your piece, those you would work back post double crochets. Like the one right here, it appears to be on the back of my piece. I will work a back post double crochet. And then for the next one, it lies above, so that would be a front post double crochet. Continue on alternating your stitches to the end of the round. When you get to the end of the round, slip stitch into the third chain from chain 3 to join. Now you will repeat this round for as many times as need be to get to the length of your ribbing. I repeated my ribbing round 7 times. Repeat the same steps for your second sleeve, and that completes this top. All that's left to do is to weave in all your ends. Using your yarn needle, weave in all those tail ends into the wrong side, going back and forth into your stitches. And that does it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed it.